"You're just a babysitter with Wi-Fi," my sister smirked at Thanksgiving. But when her CEO walked in and said, "You're her sister?" Wow. I owe her everything, the room went silent. I'm Ava. I'm 32, divorced, living back with my parents after a rocky split from my ex-husband. My life is simple, sometimes too simple, and definitely not the shiny, perfect life my older sister Fiona seems to have. She's got everything together: a thriving career as the CEO of a tech startup, a perfect husband, and a seemingly perfect life. Meanwhile, I work from home as a freelance social media consultant for small businesses. It's not glamorous, but it pays the bills. Thanksgiving was approaching, and as usual, Fiona was already texting me about what I was expected to do for the dinner. My parents had been trying to keep things civil, but every year, I could feel the weight of their disappointment in me. I wasn't where they expected me to be at this point in life, and that didn't help the tension between me and Fiona. This Thanksgiving, though, was different. I wasn't prepared for what was about to unfold. It started with the usual, Fiona being the picture-perfect hostess, casually tossing sarcastic comments about my freelance career as if I was just wasting time. Then, as we were finishing dessert, a man walked into the room, a tall, sharply dressed man that no one recognized at first. He was obviously someone important, and when he introduced himself, my world turned upside down. The dinner begins. I arrived at my parents' house, feeling the familiar knots in my stomach. Every holiday felt the same, me, trying my best not to feel like a failure, and Fiona doing everything she could to remind everyone, and me, that she had made it. Mom greeted me with a warm smile, but even she looked slightly uncomfortable, as if she was apologizing for something that had already happened. Dad was in his usual chair, reading the newspaper, trying to ignore the elephant in the room. Fiona was already at the dining table, scrolling through her phone, as though the dinner was just another event in her packed schedule. "Hey, Ava, good to see you," Fiona said, without looking up from her screen. "You going to be working from here today, or just lurking in the background?" I chuckled softly, trying to brush it off. Fiona never seemed to pass up an opportunity to remind me how much better she had it. "Just here to help, as usual," I said, going over to the kitchen to greet Mom. As we began setting the table and preparing for the meal, I could hear Fiona on the phone with someone, her voice sharp and commanding as she arranged business meetings or closed deals, completely unaware, or maybe she just didn't care, that I was within earshot. My mom, as always, tried to smooth things over. "Ava, you're doing great, sweetheart. You've been working so hard. It's not about the big flashy job, it's about being happy with what you do." Her words were comforting, but I knew deep down that my parents wished I had more than a small online business. They were proud of me, but they couldn't help but compare me to Fiona, whose career had skyrocketed in ways they could only dream of for me. Fiona's husband, Peter, arrived next, looking impeccably dressed, as always. He was a lawyer, highly respected, and he gave me a polite nod, but it was clear that he didn't really know what to say to me. I was just the other sister, the one who couldn't quite measure up. "Everything's perfect," Fiona said to Peter, smiling with that professional charm of hers as she led him to the table. "Ava's just doing her usual thing, small business stuff." I could feel the subtle jab in her words, but again, I didn't respond. I was used to it. Dinner began, and the conversation flowed as expected, moments of awkward silence when the focus shifted to me, followed by Fiona talking about her new company projects, new clients, new ideas. Peter added his thoughts, and everyone else nodded in agreement. I didn't mind, I just sat quietly, trying to push down the frustration that boiled up every time Fiona made her remarks. The conversation turned to travel, and I took the opportunity to speak up. "Actually, I've been doing some work for a couple of tech startups lately. I helped a few companies fix their social media strategies." Fiona raised an eyebrow and smirked. "Tech startups? That's cute. So, you're like a freelance consultant now?" I nodded, trying to keep my voice even. "Yeah. It's been going well." Fiona's smile was sharp, as if she was amused by the idea. "Well, I suppose it's good to have Wi-Fi and some free time to call yourself a consultant." I felt the sting of her words, but I didn't let it show. Instead, I excused myself to the kitchen to help Mom with the pie. Dinner continued, with Fiona dominating the conversation as always. I thought about how my life had turned out, how I was still trying to piece it all together after the divorce and years of feeling like I wasn't enough. Then, just when I thought the evening would drag on in the same uncomfortable way it always did, the doorbell rang. I looked at my mom, who seemed surprised by the visitor. Who could that be? She wondered aloud. I'll get it, Dad said, getting up from his chair. But before he could reach the door, my mom was already halfway across the room. I could hear her voice, full of surprise. Gary? Is that you? I froze. The name Gary was one I hadn't heard in years, but it was unmistakable. Gary Harrison, my mom repeated, her voice full of disbelief. You're here? The man who walked in was tall, with sharp features and a presence that instantly commanded attention. He was impeccably dressed, his dark suit pressed perfectly, his briefcase in hand. Gary, this is our daughter Ava, Mom said, clearly still shocked. And this is Fiona. Fiona stood up, visibly startled. She stared at the man, clearly recognizing him. Gary. Gary Harrison, she asked, her voice a little shaky. Gary smiled, nodding. Yes, that's right. I know this is a surprise. I've been in town for business, and I thought I'd stop by. He turned toward me then, and something in his gaze shifted. Wait, he said, his voice tinged with recognition. You're her sister? He pointed at Fiona, and the entire room seemed to go still. I nodded, unsure of what was happening. Gary's face lit up. Ava, right? I have to say, you've completely changed the game for us at H-Tech. The social media overhaul you did for us last year? That saved us. I owe you everything. The room fell into an eerie silence. Fiona's face turned as pale as a sheet, and she blinked rapidly, as if trying to process what she'd just heard. My parents looked from Gary to me, their eyes wide. Fiona, the woman who had always been the shining star in the family, stood frozen. She couldn't speak. It was as if her world had just been turned upside down. Gary continued, completely oblivious to the tension he had just stirred. Honestly, we couldn't have done it without you. I'm sure Fiona never told you, but I'm grateful for everything you did. Fiona tried to mask her shock with a strained smile. Right. I didn't realize. I mean, I had no idea you two worked together. I smiled, finally feeling some recognition for the work I had done, but I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. The look on Fiona's face was enough. The room was unnervingly quiet after Gary's declaration. It wasn't awkward in the usual way, but in a strange, heavy sort of way, like the weight of the truth was suddenly pressing down on everyone. Fiona's smile wavered, but she quickly recovered, though it was clear that she was trying to regain control of a situation that had just slipped out of her hands. She turned to me, the expression in her eyes a mix of disbelief and something else. Was it jealousy? Or perhaps guilt? I couldn't quite tell. I had no idea, Ava, she said, her voice strained. I didn't know you had worked with Gary. I shrugged nonchalantly, trying not to let the triumph I felt show. I wasn't in the mood to make a spectacle of it. I've been doing a lot of freelance work with tech companies. It's not something I always talk about. But yeah, I helped with their social media strategy. It worked out really well. Gary, still completely unaware of the brewing storm, laughed and leaned against the counter. Well, I can't tell you how much we appreciate your work, Ava. Seriously. It made a huge difference for us. Fiona's mouth tightened. She stood a little straighter, trying to mask the discomfort that was clearly creeping up on her. It wasn't the first time I'd seen her try to keep up appearances, but this felt different. She wasn't the one in control of the conversation anymore, and for the first time in years, I could see the cracks in her armor. Peter, who had been mostly silent throughout the whole exchange, cleared his throat. He didn't seem as shocked as the rest of us, but there was a tension in his posture as he addressed Gary. Gary, it's been great seeing you again, he said, but his voice lacked the usual enthusiasm. It was almost like he was trying to move the conversation along, hoping to steer it back to safe ground. Gary nodded politely, not catching the underlying tension in Peter's voice. Of course. I'll be around for a few more days. We should all catch up soon. He glanced back at Fiona. You've got a great sister here, Fiona. I'll never forget what she did for us. Fiona managed to muster a smile, though it looked like she was forcing it. I'm sure she's done some great work, she said, her words coming out too quickly, too harsh. But we've always been so focused on our own paths. Right, Ava? I felt my stomach twist at her words. She wasn't just talking about business anymore. I could tell she was talking about the years of tension between us, the unspoken rivalry, the comparisons. And even though I had been trying to keep things civil, Fiona's comment dug under my skin, just like it always did. The evening went on in a strange sort of awkwardness. The conversation shifted away from work, with everyone trying their best to act normal, but the mood had undeniably changed. My mom and dad seemed oblivious to the underlying tension, still hoping to create the perfect family holiday they'd always dreamed of. But I wasn't oblivious. I could feel Fiona's eyes on me throughout the rest of the evening. Every now and then, I caught her glancing in my direction, her brow furrowed in what looked like confusion. She didn't know what to make of me anymore, and I could see it in the way she studied me. It was as if she had just realized that I was more than the little sister she had always looked down on. When dessert was served, Fiona leaned in and whispered to Peter. I couldn't hear their conversation, but the intensity of her gaze told me everything I needed to know. There was a moment when I almost felt bad for her, when I saw the mask slip, and I knew that she was struggling to keep everything in place. But then, I remembered the years of passive-aggressive comments and condescending remarks. I remembered how she'd always made me feel small, how she'd dismissed everything I did as trivial. As we all gathered around the table to finish our pie, I could feel Fiona's gaze lingering on me. Her eyes were filled with something, regret, maybe? Or maybe it was just pure frustration. Either way, it wasn't the same confident, controlling sister I'd grown up with. There was something vulnerable about her now. And I hated to admit it, but for the first time in a long while, I felt a sense of power I hadn't known I was capable of. Later that night, after dinner, everyone started to trickle out, saying their goodbyes with polite smiles, but the air was thick with unspoken words. Fiona and Peter were the first to leave. Fiona didn't say goodbye to me directly, but I could feel her eyes on me one last time as she walked out the door. There was a certain quiet intensity in her gaze, as if she was searching for something from me that I wasn't willing to give her. Gary stayed for a bit longer, chatting with my parents about some business trip he had taken recently. I could tell my mom was still in shock over the unexpected connection between Gary and me. She kept repeating how surprised she was that I had helped such a big company. You've really been making an impact, Ava, she said, her voice filled with pride. I didn't realize you'd done so much. I just smiled, nodding. It's been a lot of hard work, but it's paying off. Gary, noticing my discomfort, stood up to leave. It's been great seeing you all, he said warmly. I'm sure I'll be back in town soon. Ava, don't be a stranger. Take care, Gary, I said. As soon as he left, my parents looked at me as if they were seeing me in a new light. I had always been the quiet one, the one who was content with small things, but for the first time, I could tell they were starting to realize that I wasn't as invisible as they had thought. For a few moments, we sat in silence, letting the day settle in. It wasn't until my mom broke the quiet with a sigh that I realized how much had actually changed. You know, Ava, she began slowly, we've always been proud of you. But maybe we haven't given you enough credit for what you've been doing. I didn't know how to respond to that. Part of me wanted to say something snarky, to remind them of all the times they'd pushed me aside in favor of Fiona. But another part of me felt relieved. Maybe this Thanksgiving had done something unexpected, it had shown my parents that I was more than just the sister they had written off. I appreciate that, Mom, I said quietly. But I'm still finding my way, you know? she nodded, looking at me with an expression that was softer than I was used to. I know. But we'll always be here for you. As the evening wore on and the last of the pie was eaten, I could feel a strange peace settle over me. I didn't expect it to come this way, but somehow, Thanksgiving had turned into something much more than just a family dinner. For once, I wasn't just the invisible one. Fiona had made it clear earlier in the night that she was rattled, even if she tried to hide it with her usual sharp words and perfect smile. But I could see it in the way she looked at me, the way her grip tightened around her wine glass as Gary left. The perfect world she'd built for herself had cracked, even if only a little. I didn't know what to expect when Fiona texted me the next day. Part of me thought it would be the usual snide remark, but when I saw her name pop up on my phone screen, it wasn't a jab at my career or another comment about how I'd never measure up. Instead, it was a simple message: Ava, I owe you an apology. I stared at the screen for a moment, uncertain of what to make of it. I hadn't expected this, certainly not from someone who'd always found a way to put me down in the most subtle ways. I let the message sit there for a while before I decided to respond. I didn't want to seem eager, but I also wasn't going to ignore it. So, I replied, I'm listening. Fiona's response came a few minutes later, more heartfelt than I'd ever expected from her. I've been thinking about last night, and I realized how I've treated you for so many years. I was always so focused on myself, on proving I was the best, that I never took the time to appreciate you. I'm sorry for the things I said, and for always making you feel like you didn't matter. Reading her words felt surreal. Was she really apologizing? Fiona, the CEO, the one who always made me feel like I was insignificant, was actually acknowledging my worth. I let out a slow breath, feeling a mix of relief and cautious optimism. I'm glad you see it. I don't need you to apologize, Fiona. But I think it's time we both accept that we're not in competition anymore. I've been doing my own thing, and you've been doing yours. We're both successful in our own ways. There was a pause before she replied again, You're right. I've been competitive for too long. And, honestly, I don't think I've ever really understood what you've been doing. But after last night, I think I get it now. I'm not going to pretend that everything is perfect between us, but I'd like to try and make it better. The sincerity in her words caught me off guard. For years, I had felt invisible to her, as though I didn't matter at all. But in that moment, Fiona was offering me something I hadn't expected, an olive branch. It wasn't going to fix everything overnight, but it was a start. It felt like the first time in years that I had been seen for who I was, not just as her lesser counterpart. I didn't respond right away. I needed time to process. This apology, whether it was motivated by guilt or something deeper, felt like a small victory. But it wasn't the ultimate victory. That had come the night before, when Fiona saw me in a light she had never wanted to before, as someone who had made her mark, who was capable of impacting her world in ways she hadn't anticipated. The following week, Fiona invited me to a meeting at her company's headquarters. At first, I wasn't sure if I wanted to go. Was this an attempt to make up for everything, or was she just trying to ease her guilt? But then I realized that I didn't need her approval anymore. I had already proven to myself that I didn't need to measure up to her, that I had my own worth. Still, I decided to go, if only to see what she was offering. When I walked into the sleek, glass-walled office building, Fiona greeted me with a warm smile. Her usual polished, confident exterior was still there, but now there was something more vulnerable beneath it. You look great, she said, motioning to the chairs in her office. Sit down, Ava. I have something to discuss. I took a seat, unsure of what was coming next. Fiona's office was exactly what I had expected, modern, immaculate, and businesslike. She sat across from me, her expression serious. I've been thinking, she began, her hands resting on the desk, about how I can make up for the years I've spent making you feel like you didn't matter. I know I can't undo everything, but I can at least try to do better. I raised an eyebrow. What do you mean? I've got a big project coming up, Fiona said, leaning forward. It's a social media rebranding campaign for one of our most important clients. And I want you to take the lead on it. I blinked in surprise. What? I want to bring you into the company as a consultant. You've got the skills. You proved that last year, when you helped Gary's team. I didn't recognize it before, but I see it now. You're really good at what you do. And I think it's time I acknowledge that. I felt my heart race a little. This wasn't just an apology anymore. This was her offering me something real, a chance to work on a high-profile project, a chance to prove that I could make a difference in her world. You're serious? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Fiona nodded, her eyes steady. I'm serious. I don't want to compete with you anymore. I want to work with you. I've always had a team of experts in my corner, but I've never worked with someone I can trust on this level. You've earned that trust. I didn't know how to react at first. Part of me wanted to say no, to walk out of that office and leave Fiona to her perfect world. But another part of me, the part that had been overlooked for so long, realized that this was the closure I had been waiting for. I'll think about it, I said, standing up to leave. Fiona looked a little disappointed, but she nodded. Take your time. But just know, I'm here. And I want you on my team. A month later, I took Fiona up on her offer, and working together didn't turn out the way I expected. We didn't suddenly become best friends or erase all the years of tension between us, but there was a mutual respect there. Fiona and I began to collaborate, and she started to see me not as the little sister she had always overshadowed, but as a capable, driven professional who brought value to the table. I led the social media rebranding campaign for her company, and it was a huge success. The project earned praise from clients, and Fiona publicly acknowledged my contributions during a company meeting. It was a small victory, but it was enough. The most satisfying part, though, was watching Fiona, once the untouchable golden child, gradually come to terms with the fact that we didn't need to compete anymore. We didn't need to be rivals. We both had our own place in the world, and in the end, we had both earned our success in different ways. Fiona's apology wasn't just words, it was a quiet acknowledgement that she had underestimated me. It wasn't a grand gesture of revenge, but a simple moment where I proved that I wasn't just the babysitter with Wi-Fi. And in the end, I think that was all I really needed. Fiona may have walked into that Thanksgiving dinner as the shining star, but by the time it was all said and done, I realized I had outshone her in my own way.